Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you are watching this video lecture. In the earlier session, we discussed about section 30 and 31 of the Income Tax Act, which give deductions in respect of the expenditure related to rent, rates, taxes, repairs and insurance for building, as well as repairs, insurance and other expenses related to machinery, plant and furniture. After that, we started the discussion on section 32, that is depreciation allowance or expenditure in the form of depreciation which is allowed as deduction under section 32. In that, key points to be noted were, first of all, under Income Tax Act, depreciation is calculated not on a asset by asset basis but on a block of assets basis, and the method of depreciation that has to be followed for computation has to be always written down value method only. And different rates of depreciation have been prescribed in the Act. Of course, this list is not exhaustive. There are so many other assets. We don't need to really go through all of them. So at least some of the important assets we have listed there. I hope you all have by hearted that list. You have to remember the rates of depreciation applicable for different types of assets according to that table. And also, what is a block of assets? We have discussed that it is a group of assets falling within a class of assets in respect of which the same percentage of depreciation is prescribed. And the methodology of computation of written down value also we discussed, where you have to start with the opening WDV, add the assets purchased, acquired during the previous year with a proper segregation of assets which are put to use for less than 180 days and assets put to use for 180 days or more. And from that deducting the sale proceeds of the assets which have been discarded, sold, demolished, whatever happened during the previous year, the sale proceeds have to be reduced from the total of opening WDV plus purchases. Then what we get is depreciable amount at the end of the year, and on that depreciable amount, the rates of depreciation as prescribed in the Act have to be applied for the purpose of computation of depreciation, and that has to be reduced, whatever we calculated. That depreciation has to be reduced from the depreciable amount so that we get depreciated value at the end of the year, which will become the depreciated value at the beginning of next year, and this story continues year after year. That is a way of computing depreciation under section 32 of the Income Tax Act. But naturally a question comes, why this 180 days is important? Yes, it is very important. The date of purchase and the date when it is put to use is very important, because if an asset is put to use for less than 180 days, only half of the normal depreciation shall be allowed as deduction. Whatever the rate prescribed, on that rate, half of that only will be allowed as deduction if that asset is put to use for less than 180 days during the previous year in which it was acquired. After that, every year, full depreciation will be anyway provided. For the first year, when it was acquired, we have to check whether it was acquired and put to use for 180 days or more or not. And by the way, the date of sale is immaterial, that is irrelevant. Whatever the date on which the asset might be sold from that block, that sale proceeds have to be just reduced from the opening WDV plus purchases, irrespective of the date of sale. These are the very crucial aspects related to the topic, concept and provision related to depreciation. But another important point also comes, while calculating the WDV of a block of assets, what has to be considered is actual cost, and that actual cost of the assets has to be added when we use this calculation for computation of written down value. After the opening WDV, the actual cost of the assets has to be added to that opening WDV. If the assets are purchased, there is no big deal about actual cost. Actual cost means whatever the cost of purchase is, that itself will become actual cost. But under multiple circumstances, different situations, the actual cost may not be just that simple. Each of them is a unique scenario. So, the discussion related to how to compute actual cost under different situations also becomes very important when we compute the WDV for the purpose of computing depreciation under section 32. So, the actual cost, whatever is the amount that has to be considered as actual cost of the assets which are acquired during the previous year, how to compute that, how to take that under different scenarios. Each of the points is a different situation. First scenario is naturally the one where we just purchase the asset. There is no problem. Then what is actual cost in relation to the purchase price? Whatever the purchase price of the asset is there, that will be the actual cost. But is it only purchase price, or will there be any other things also that will be included in that actual cost? That is what is important. Of course, the cost price of the asset will be there anyway, that is the actual cost, plus interest and bank charges related to the loan which was taken for the purchase of the asset. So if there was any loan that is taken for the purpose of purchase of asset, interest or bank charges on such loan shall be capitalized. But again, a point has to be noted. Up to what period that interest has to be capitalized? Till the asset is put to use, not the entire interest. Asset is purchased, let us say it is put to use immediately. And if it is just a purchased asset, there will not be no interest or bank charges that will be added to the cost of the asset. However, if the asset is purchased and there is a loan that was taken for the purchase of that asset and there is an interest on such loan, and there is a time period between when it was purchased and when it is put to use, then the interest related to the pre-acquisition period or the pre-installation period shall be capitalized. Capitalized means what? It shall be added to the cost of the asset. So that is one more important point to be noted, that is interest. We can call it as pre-acquisition interest or pre-installation interest that should be added to the cost of asset. So what happens to the interest after the asset is put to use? It will be as usual like any other revenue expenditure that will be allowed as deduction separately. It will not be added to the cost of the asset. So once again, the concept of capital expenditure and revenue expenditure becomes very important. The interest which is related to the loan taken for the purpose of purchase of the asset prior to that asset being put to use is a capital expenditure. Hence, that should be capitalized. Hence, that should be added to the cost of the asset. Post the installation, post the asset is put to use, it is a revenue expenditure. So, it will not come here. It will be naturally charged as any other normal expenditure, and of course is allowed as deduction separately. So, that is a point related to interest. And not only that, if there are any expenses incurred to bring the asset to site, all expenses incurred for bringing the asset to the current condition and location before installation, all of them have to be added. Like what? Carriage inwards, loading and unloading charges, installation charges, all these things will be incurred before the asset is installed, before the asset is really put to use. So if those are the things which were incurred before the asset is put to use, all of them will be added to the actual cost of the asset. That is a point to be noted. Of course, we have to also understand when we talk about fixed assets need not be always purchased. They can be constructed also. Imagine a particular company is constructing its head office building. Head office building construction takes a lot of time. So all the expenditure that is incurred for the construction of that building till that building is put to use will be considered as the cost of that building. That is the actual cost of such fixed asset. So fixed assets may be purchased also, may be even constructed also. But logic what we have to keep in mind is every expenditure that has been incurred for the purpose of bringing the asset to the current condition and location has to be considered as part of actual cost of that asset. That is the first and foremost and important point to start with. Of course, if there are any other expenses to facilitate the use of assets, something like repairs and modification prior to the use of asset to make it workable. Examples these are. Prior to is very important. Once the asset is put to use, all the expenses incurred later, if any repairs expenditure is incurred later, that is not a capital expenditure. That cannot be added to the actual cost. But if any repairs expenditure is incurred or modification expenditure is incurred prior to the asset being put to use, that will be naturally of capital nature, hence that will be capitalized, which means that will be added to the actual cost of the asset. Something like training expenses of the staff before the use of the plant. Once again, before the plant is put to use, if any training expenses are incurred for the staff so that they will understand how to use this machinery and all, if any such expenses are incurred, those can be capitalized also. Those can be added to the cost of the asset. Not only that, any expenditure on the essential construction work. Naturally, if there is any construction work related to the plant and machinery or other buildings, that should be capitalized. Say for example, cold storage rooms or cooling towers, etc. These all things have to be capitalized because those are all capital expenditure. Simple logic is those are capital expenses. So naturally they have to be capitalized. Capitalized means they have to be added to the cost of the asset. And not only that, if at all there is any expenditure in relation to the insurance, power and fuel, once again incurred before the commencement of the business related to this asset, that shall be capitalized. Expenses before the commencement of business are not allowed as deduction. We know that already from the basic concepts. But what can be done if there is any expenditure related to the assets before commencement of business, like an asset was insured already and for test run, trial run, etc., maybe some power was consumed, maybe some fuel was consumed, then that is all part of the actual cost of the asset. One common point if you observe in all the points is all the expenses we are talking about as capital expenditure, which should be capitalized, which should be included in the actual cost of the fixed assets, is always incurred prior to the asset being put to use, prior to the installation of the asset. That is an important point. Post installation, post put to use, post commencement of business, every expenditure like this. For example, insurance of the machinery. Of course, already there is a section 31 for that. If it is insurance for building, there is section 30 for that. Those are all revenue expenses. Post commencement of business. Prior to commencement of business, no. That is not revenue expenditure. That is a capital expenditure. Hence, that can be added to the actual cost of the fixed assets from that date onwards when the business has been commenced. That is a normal situation of where an asset is purchased by the SSE or acquired, constructed by the SSE. That is a point to be noted. First point. Second point, interest related to any period after the asset is first put to use cannot be included in actual cost. Why is that? Just now as we discussed, because it is revenue expenditure. So what should we do? That will be normally treated as deduction separately. It will not be added to the actual cost of the asset. So that is not a capital expenditure. Hence it will not be added to the actual cost of asset. Simple. Then some other cases, particularly, say for example, there was some traveling that happened, expenditure incurred on traveling for purchasing of the depreciable asset. Is that part of the actual cost? Answer is yes, it is. Let us say some of the technical managers of the company have traveled abroad before they purchased their assets, and their traveling expenses in relation to the acquisition of that asset shall also form part of actual cost. Once again, why? Because it is also a capital expenditure. So the judgment here has to be always whether that expenditure is incurred prior to the installation of the asset or not. Is that related to the activities which have been helpful in bringing the asset to the present condition and location or not? If yes, that is a capital expenditure, then that has to be added to the actual cost. If no, then that is a revenue expenditure, and if it is a genuine expenditure, definitely it will be allowed as deduction under any other section. So that has nothing to do with the discussion on actual cost if it is a revenue expenditure. So that is the first point to be noted related to assets which are acquired by purchase or construction within the organization. Now let us look at some other variety situations, and let me give a important guidance at this point of time. If you understand all the points we have here, we are talking about actual cost at the juncture of where we are discussing about depreciation, section 32, computation and all. We are going to discuss many different variety situations. These situations will repeat in capital gains also. Situations will repeat. The treatment, requirement, why is it useful, that will be different. But situations will repeat. So we have to be very clear about multiple situations, what happen, and again all of them are logical. There is nothing to by heart in this. Just simply if you understand the logic, that is enough. But each situation is unique. What are the situations which are possible to be faced in computing the actual cost? Let us take one such case like gift or inheritance. That means SSC did not purchase the asset. He got it just like that from somebody as a gift, or inheritance. From his ancestors he got an asset. Like that it happened. Inheritance need not mean only that. It could be from any other way also, succession also. Anyway, the asset has not been purchased by the SSC. He got it just like that, Phukat mein. Just like that he got it. Then how much will be actual cost? Question comes, because he did not purchase. If he purchased, we know actual cost. Okay, boss, he purchased it for 10 lakhs rupees. Actual cost is 10 lakhs, no problem. But now he did not purchase only. He just like that got the asset. He acquired the asset, that's all. So variety situation. In that situation, what should be taken as actual cost for the SSE? That is something which the law should clarify us. Otherwise, normally speaking, it looks like actual cost of that asset for SSE is zero, because he did not pay anything. But is it correct? No. Zero cannot be the actual cost. What will be the actual cost? The WDV of the asset in the hands of the previous owner will be considered as cost of acquisition. That is the law. That is the provision related to this scenario where asset is acquired by way of gift or inheritance. What will be the actual cost in the hands of the successor, recipient of that asset, the current SSE? That will be the written down value for the previous owner. In other words, understand this logic. Whatever the written down value of the previous owner was there, that was the ending point for the previous owner. Now that becomes the starting point of the current owner, though he did not pay a penny for acquiring that asset. In other words, this transaction itself is as good as not really identified in essence. The story of the asset is just continuing. Story of the asset has not stopped. Only thing is it has changed hands. Earlier, some other previous owner was claiming depreciation, and after claiming depreciation for so many years, there was some WDV in his hands. That will be the starting point for the current owner. Then the story continues once again. That will be considered as actual cost or cost of acquisition for the current owner who got the asset, who acquired the asset free of cost, like a gift or inheritance. So, what is the actual cost in that case? WDV in the hands of previous owner. That is one variety situation which has to be remembered separately. It is not a normal scenario. That's a unique situation. Normally asset purchased means purchased, that's all. There is no big deal in that. But what we are looking at in this discussion on actual cost, not just the normal situations. There are separate situations, different situations. Now, let us skip the next point and go to the next point. We will come back to the building point later because it is similar to the another point. But let us look at variety situations first. Let us say if an asset is acquired from a 100% subsidiary company or from a 100% holding company, means the SSE is either the 100% subsidiary company or 100% holding company of some other company from which the SSE has acquired the asset. Then, what should be the actual cost for the SSE? SSE is naturally the transferee of the asset. Somebody has transferred the asset to the transferee, and whatever the price at which they might have transferred, we don't care. We will say what is the actual cost for the transferee is the WDV in the hands of transferor. In other words, once again, the story will continue. When the asset got transferred from 100% subsidiary company or holding company to its 100% holding company or subsidiary company, then the WDV in the hands of transferor will continue to be the cost of acquisition for transferee. Why is that? Now imagine a situation like this. Why is that? Let us say there is a subsidiary company, just an example, vice versa is also possible. Let us say there is a subsidiary company and a holding company. Naturally, we are talking about 100% subsidiary company and 100% holding company. If that is the case, when there is a 100% subsidiary company or 100% holding company, one company might be in profits, other company might be in losses. Quite possible. The one company which is in profits want to show its profits to be low, which naturally will be the objective of any SEC, so that they can reduce their income tax liability. So what that company can do is they can create a transaction in such a way that the loss making company or less profit making company will transfer the asset to the more profit making company at a very huge amount, which not really is the actual value of that. Let us say there is a holding company and a subsidiary company, and the subsidiary company is a loss making company, just for understanding purposes, not necessarily it is only like an example. Let us consider this. One of the companies is a loss making company. So let us just take a simple example. H is their holding company, subsidiary company. In our example, subsidiary company, a small company, whatever it is a loss making company. Holding company has a lot of profits which it wants to actually show lesser. So what it will do is, subsidiary company will sell an asset to the holding company. Sell an asset to the holding company. So normally speaking, let us say that written down value of the asset in the books of subsidiary company is say only 10 crores rupees. And subsidiary company will sell the asset to the holding company, let us say at 50 crores rupees. So simply what happened? Holding company acquired this asset, and what will be the cost of acquisition according to them? It will be 50 crores, and it will provide depreciation on 50 crores. Whereas it was supposed to provide depreciation only on 10 crores if it was originally the real value of the asset according to the books of subsidiary company. But if this provision is not there, this is not going to happen what we are discussing, because the provision is there. The provision exactly is aiming to restrict such tax evading plans. If this provision is not there, this is what people will do. One of the subsidiary companies or holding companies will sell the assets to the other company at a very higher price. Okay, fine, subsidiary company made a profit of 40 crores, no doubt. It made a profit of 40 crores because it already has a lot of losses. This profit will be just set off against those losses. Ultimately, there may not be much impact on the tax liability of subsidiary company. There is no problem for subsidiary company. It doesn't have to pay any higher tax because already it has losses, sufficient losses. That's what might be the scenario here, example we are talking. If that happens, subsidiary company is not paying any tax because of its losses, and even though it made a profit of 40 crores from this transaction, okay, that is not a profit, business profit, that is a capital gain, definitely, but still, in spite of that, income is income, 40 crores income that was made by and earned by subsidiary company, still it will not have much impact on the tax liability of subsidiary company because of its already high losses. But what happened to the holding company? It has already high profits. What it is doing now? Let us say if this is a plant and machinery. Normally 15% depreciation means they were supposed to claim a depreciation of only 1.5 crores on this 10 crores worth of machinery what they got from S Limited. But now 15% of 50 crores, around 7.5 crores depreciation they will claim 7.5 crores of depreciation they are claiming. That means they can reduce their income by 6 crores. And just imagine the 30% tax rate, they are saving a tax of 1.8 crores. For actually there is no transaction. Because both are anyway same. Legally they are different. Holding company is a different legal entity, subsidiary company is a different legal entity, no doubt. But essentially what? Essentially both are same because they are having 100% holding and subsidiary relationship. That means Income Tax Act almost for its provisional purposes recognizes holding company, subsidiary company as if they are one and same. That means once again substance over form prevails in income tax. It will not look at only the legal form. Yes, legally speaking, one company sold something to another company, nothing wrong in that. Both are separate legal entities, nothing wrong in that. But why they did that, how they did that? To avoid the tax, they might do that. That is why, to stop all these type of possibilities, there are many possibilities similar to this, vice versa also. But in order to stop such possibilities, what the Income Tax Act prescribes is, if there is any asset that is acquired from a 100% subsidiary company or a holding company, what is the actual cost of acquisition? We don't care. It may be less also, more also, high also, low also, doesn't matter. Automatically, whatever the written down value in the hands of the transferor, that becomes the cost of acquisition for transferee. Which means in our example, H Limited being the transferee cannot say its cost of acquisition is 50 crores. Whatever the original written down value in the hands of transferor, that is S Limited, which was 10 crores, that will be considered as the cost of acquisition of H Limited. That is a starting point for H Limited. Of course, on that it can only claim a depreciation of 15%, let us say, for machinery, 1.5 crores. It cannot claim 7.5 crores. No benefit of 6 crores lesser income. No benefit of 1.8 crores tax saving. All these things are just ruled out because of this provision. So, this 40 crores profit and all also no, illogical. There is nothing. Whatever they have that happened, that is different. But we are not talking about the capital gains. If they say this, even then, it is actually the worst case. Let us say if they really say that S Limited has sold an asset to H Limited, then on one hand, H Limited has to record it at 10 crores only. It cannot record it at 50 crores. On other hand, S Limited will have to have a capital gain of 40 crores because it is telling that it has sold for 50 crores. Worth 10 crores asset is sold for 50 crores means 40 crores capital gains is there. On one hand, taxability is there, but on the other hand, higher amount of cost of acquisition is not possible. That is why this all transaction nobody will do. I'm not telling that it will happen. Why they will not do like this? Because of that provision. So while learning the provisions, sometimes, particularly from now onwards, PGBP, etc., we have to also keep in mind what would have happened if the provision is not there. Then we can understand the provision easily. If this provision was not there, people would have told that, oh, we purchased the asset at a very high cost and I am providing lot of depreciation. But from whom you purchased, sir? From their own subsidiary company and holding company. That means it is as good as a fake transaction. So Income Tax Act will not tell all this logic, why and all. Simply it says the provision. Intention of the statute is not something that statute will tell. That is something that we have to understand. But what does the statute say? If there is any asset acquired from a 100% subsidiary company or holding company, then the written down value in the hands of the transferor will continue to be the cost of acquisition for the transferee. Dot. That's it. That is one more scenario other than normal acquisition. Normal purchase is anyway there, and gift and inheritance is one scenario. Transfer of assets between subsidiary company and holding company is another scenario. That has to be also remembered and understood very well, because as I told, these all points will come once again in capital gains. Again and again we cannot discuss what is the transaction. Provision we can discuss. But why is that logic? Logic and all will be known only once. So what is the logic here? Effectively, the Income Tax Act is almost ignoring any transaction actually between subsidiary company and holding company if they are 100% related with each other. They are considering the Income Tax Act is almost assuming that both are one and the same. It is not telling us, but indirectly that's what it is expressing. So that's what the essence we have to understand and remember for future purposes also. Now another scenario, actually two scenarios. These are also important. We will definitely have some more situations like this in capital gains once again. What if an asset is acquired in a scheme of amalgamation or demerger, and the asset is acquired by whom? By an Indian company. Then what happens? Then also the same logic. What is the cost of acquisition for the transferee? Who is the transferee here? Indian company. That cost of acquisition of any of such assets which were acquired in the scheme of amalgamation or demerger by an Indian company who is the transferee, that shall be nothing but the written down value in the hands of transferor. So logic is once again the same, but the transaction is not the same. What is the transaction here? The transaction is amalgamation. Okay, there are separate definitions for this in the Income Tax Act. More than definition, we need to understand what does it mean, amalgamation. Amalgamation could be related to many types. All those things we don't have to distinguish as far as Income Tax Act is concerned. So let us take an example here. A Limited has purchased the business of B Limited, or A Limited purchased the business of B Limited, or you can call it A Limited acquired B Limited. So who is the transferor and transferee here? That we have to be clear. When A Limited purchased the business of B Limited, who will acquire the assets? A Limited will acquire the assets. Of whom? B Limited. So who is the transferor of the assets? That is B Limited. And who is the transferee of the assets? That is A Limited. Parties have to be clearly identified in a transaction. So in a scheme of amalgamation, A Limited acquired the business of B Limited, which means B Limited has transferred its assets to A Limited. This is what happened. Now what the provision is saying is, whatever the written down value of the assets which were there earlier prior to amalgamation in the books of B Limited, they will continue here. The story once again continues. That itself becomes the cost of acquisition or actual cost for A Limited. How much money A Limited has paid to B Limited, that we don't care. That can be a higher amount, lower amount, whatever amount, doesn't matter. Maybe that is paid for all the assets put together one by one, doesn't matter. All those things do not matter. If there is an amalgamation, if one company acquires the business of another company and the other company B Limited transfers the assets to A Limited. So B Limited is transferor, A Limited is transferee in this example. Then the assets which are acquired by A Limited by virtue of amalgamation will be having a actual cost which is equivalent to written down value of the same assets in the books of transferor, that is B Limited. That has to be understood very clearly. That is a transaction of amalgamation. But here also there is a transferor and a transferee. Always we have to identify who is who and what is happening. The transaction has to be clear. What is happening? Here B Limited has transferred the assets to A Limited, and as per Income Tax Act provisions, whatever the written down value of B Limited will continue to be the actual cost of A Limited. Once again, if you observe, the story is continuing. The asset story is not broken. That is just continuing. Where the story closed for B Limited, before amalgamation it got closed. And what was the closing? WDV. Where the story starts for A Limited, once it got the assets acquired from B Limited. But what is the starting point? Actual cost. But what is the actual cost? No difference. Where the story ended for B Limited, that is where the story starts for A Limited also. That is what actual cost means in case of amalgamation when there is a transferor and a transferee in a situation of amalgamation. Now let us understand another word which has also been given here, that is demerger. Demerger. Demerger means what? Demerger, the latest example, the biggest example, the most active example can be easily taken. Let us say this is Reliance Industries Limited, the big company, you all know that I am talking about. Mukesh Ambani's biggest company and one of the topmost companies in India. Definitely, market capitalization wise, also almost number one. Sometimes it goes to 1, 2, 3 like that. But definitely one of the biggest companies of India is Reliance Industries Limited. You know that. Now what happened is, this is really what happened recently, that is demerger. Demerger means when there is a big company like that, a piece of that company will be taken out. A piece of that company is going to be taken out. And what is that piece? Now, that piece in this example is Jio. So, Reliance Industries will continue. And this piece is now separate. And this piece, we can call this as Jio. And this is real story. So, from the Reliance Industries Limited, Jio has been separated. So, what do we call this? Demerger. It's like a piece of cake. A big cake is there. In that, one small piece has been separated. And now Reliance Industries Limited, Jio Platforms Limited, these are the two companies. These are two separate companies or not? Yes, legally they are two separate companies. And while doing so, while doing this demerger transaction, what is this piece of cake coming out? How it will come out? That is nothing but the assets and liabilities related to the Jio, which were earlier part of the entire Reliance Industries Limited. Now taken out means Jio will have its own assets and liabilities. Forget about liabilities, we are not interested in them because we are talking about depreciation. So does Jio have assets now? Of course, yes. Jio have assets. Question is, how can it claim depreciation on those assets? Did it purchase from Reliance Industries Limited or did it just got the assets from Reliance Industries? It just got it. It did not purchase. So question comes, how to calculate depreciation? Answer is very simple. There is no complication, no need to break our heads. Where the story stopped earlier, it will start now for Jio. In other words, what was the written down value of these assets when they were earlier in the balance sheet of Reliance Industries Limited? When they were earlier in the balance sheet of Reliance Industries Limited, what were the written down value of these assets? Same thing will continue to be the cost of acquisition for Jio. This is an example which happened actually, so I am taking that. Not that these all assets and all exactly will happen similar way. So demerger is nothing but a big company is there and a small piece of that company will be separated. That's all. So this will be a separate company, let us say. Now A will be a new company, this is another company, this is another company. Two companies are separate now. That is called demerger. Amalgamation is different. In case of amalgamation, A Limited is different company, B Limited is a different company. Both are not same. But in case of demerger, before demerger both are same. After demerger, now they got separated. Now A Limited is different, B Limited is different. And assets, let us say, transferred from A Limited to B Limited in this case. In this case, who is transferor? A Limited. Who is transferee? B Limited. And what will be the cost of acquisition for transferee? No difference. Whatever the written down value of those assets in the books of transferor prior to the demerger will be the cost of acquisition for transferee after the demerger also. That is another transaction which we have to understand and remember. As I said, those will be very important even in capital gains. So, transfer of assets by 100% subsidiary to 100% holding or vice versa. Assets acquired by way of gift or inheritance. Assets acquired by way of amalgamation or demerger. What is the common point in all of them? Common point is whoever the transferee is in all cases, whatever the price that transferee may have paid or may not have paid, irrespective of that, the written down value in the hands of the previous owner itself will continue to be the cost of acquisition for the current owner. That is a common logic between All the three cases, the thread of logic is same. Situation and transactions are only different. If you understand the thread of logic, that is enough. All cases will be able to easily understand and easily apply, not only in PGBP, even later in capital gains. That's it. That is a three different points which are related with each other, we can say, when we discuss about actual cost of the assets. Now let us look at a special case which we have left behind. Building. It is highlighted, underlined, so it has to be understood. Very important point. Only for building. So far all the other things are applicable for any asset. This actual cost discussion what we are doing is applicable for any asset. But this point what we are going to discuss now is only applicable for building. This is the point we are talking about. And what is the scenario here? What happened? What is the situation? Understand the situation. What happened is a building was there which was previously used for personal purposes. Originally there is a building. This is the story. Somebody has a building. He has been using that building for personal purposes for some years. But later, after some time, that was brought to the business use. So, imagine somebody has a building, has been using it for personal purposes as a house for a long time. After some time, let us say he has converted that building which he earlier used for personal purposes now into business use. Let us say he started a practice as a chartered accountant or a doctor or a lawyer or whatever other business purposes. A residential building originally which was used for personal purposes now has been brought into business. Then can he claim depreciation on this building now onwards where he has been using it now for business purposes? Of course, yes. Any building which is used for business purposes definitely can be eligible for depreciation. There is no problem in that. That can be claimed. Depreciation can be claimed on the building. That's not a problem if it is used for business purposes. But question is, did the business purchase that building? No. It is just the same building. Earlier it was used for personal purposes. Now just it was converted for business purposes. If a building is used for personal purposes, there is no concept of depreciation at all. Actually, that goes into income from house property as good as a self-occupied property. But now since it is converted into a business building, it is eligible for depreciation. But the question is on what amount? That is the question. On what amount? This is the amount which is prescribed by the Income Tax Act. What is that? Actual cost of the building as reduced by notional depreciation. That becomes the cost of acquisition of that building now when it is brought into business use. What is that? Actual cost of the building as reduced by notional depreciation. Not real, notional depreciation. Applying the rate applicable as on the date of such conversion. Which rate we have to apply? Not when the building was originally purchased. When the building was converted now into business use, whatever the rate applicable, that rate has to be applied once again as if the building was used for current purposes from the very beginning. Each point is important. So earlier the building was used for personal purposes. Now it is converted to business use. For understanding how much is the cost of acquisition or actual cost of such building, we need to take first of all originally go back to flashback and see what was the original cost of the building when it was purchased or constructed or acquired. Then year after year reduce the notional depreciation. Then whatever the written down value that results in, that becomes the actual cost of that asset now. In other words, notional WDV of the building will become the cost of the building. That's what will happen. So we have to calculate a notional WDV. But while calculating notional WDV, care has to be taken. We need to apply which rates? The rates which are applicable at the time of conversion of that asset. Maybe for example, building was acquired 10 years back. And then the rates of depreciation as per Income Tax Act then might be different. Maybe there were changes now according to the latest rates of depreciation for the current year. So which rate should we apply if a dilemma comes? There is no dilemma. The rates which are applicable at the time of conversion only shall be applied. When it was acquired, what were the rates according to that year's Income Tax Act? No need to look at that. That is first point. Second point is very important. We have to assume that as if the building was used for current purposes from the very beginning. From the very beginning, as if it is used for current purposes means what? It has to be deemed that that has been used for business only all these years. Though it was used actually for personal purposes, current purpose means business use. We have to assume that it has been used for business purposes. In other words, for understanding purposes, should we provide 5% rate of depreciation or 10% rate of depreciation, sir, is the question. Because residential buildings 5%, commercial buildings we know that rate of depreciation on buildings is 10%. Answer is we have to provide 10% rate of depreciation only. Why? Because that is the rate of depreciation for commercial usage. But no, it was not used for commercial usage now since beginning. That is why the law is telling Baba you have to consider as if the building was used for current purposes from the very beginning. That is an assumption. But the law is saying that you have to take that assumption because we are talking about notional WDV. We are calculating notional depreciation. So what we have to just assume is, okay, this building was purchased on so and so date, and since then it was used for business purpose only. It is all not reality. We have to assume that. So we have to apply that rates only which are related to commercial property, which is 10%. And for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever the number of years that has been used, we have to calculate notional depreciation, WDV, again depreciation, WDV, again depreciation, WDV. Like that for years and years together, we have to do this. Whatever finally that remains, that is the notional WDV of that building at the time of conversion. That will be starting point for the business. That becomes the cost of the building for the business. Business has not purchased it, only just earlier residential usage building is now converted into commercial usage. In that case, the provision is very clear. Notional WDV shall become the cost of the building. That's a very important point. And why I said very important is not just for calculation purposes. Anyway, bits will be there. MCQs can be asked from this. It is also very important because this provision is applicable only for building. He will give an asset has been purchased. Let us say a car was purchased by so and so Mr. Suresh 4 years back, and after 4 years, now in the previous year he has converted that car for business purposes. So what will you do? People seriously will calculate notional WDV and all that and get 0 marks. Why? Because this provision is not applicable for a car, sir. This provision is not applicable for any other asset. This is applicable only for building. Only means only. That's all. In all other cases, whatever the asset originally purchased price is there, that itself will be the cost of acquisition. No notional depreciation, no notional WDV for other assets. Be very careful. Conversion of personal assets into business assets, notional depreciation is applicable only and only for building. Many people have done wrong answers just by applying this provision unnecessarily. Don't do that. That is a very important aspect because of that. So gift inheritance, subsidiary holding, amalgamation demerger, all three one side. Building previously acquired and used for commercial purposes, now converted to business use is a different scenario. Then a similar scenario is there for another point also. So we can combine these 2 points after this building thing. For example, let us say an asset is brought into India by a non-resident. Asset is brought into India by a non-resident. Once again, the asset was used earlier somewhere outside India. Let us say doctor is there, has been practicing somewhere in US. He has some medical equipments while he was practicing in US. He used them for 4 or 5 years and now he is bringing those medical equipments along with him to India because he wants to start a practice in India. He starts and brings those equipments in India and uses them for his profession. Example I am telling. But he did not purchase them now, right? He purchased them long back. So question comes, story though started in India now only, but assets were not purchased now. What should be the actual cost of those assets? Yes, what should be the actual cost? That should be original cost, whatever the paid for purchasing those assets in other country, as reduced by notional depreciation as if the asset has been used in India since its original acquisition. Once again, same concept of notional depreciation will apply. So he purchased 4 years back medical equipment. Let us say that equipment is eligible for so and so percentage of depreciation in India, we have to assume that as if the asset has been used in India for all these years, starting from the original cost of the asset, we have to reduce depreciation each year, again WDV, again depreciation, again WDV, like this. Whatever the notional WDV now, when that asset is brought into India, before that asset is brought into India, that becomes the cost of acquisition of that asset for the current previous year. Then the story continues. Up to now, it was notional depreciation for the purpose of computing the cost of acquisition, for the purpose of computing actual cost. We did that notional depreciation. But now onwards, because the asset is in India and anyway he is using that for his business or profession, story continues. There will be depreciation in India and WD will be calculated, real depreciation will be calculated in this year onwards. So the logic of these 2 points is one and the same. If a building has been converted from personal building to a business building, or an asset is brought by a non-resident to the India, then logic is same in both cases. What is the result? Notional WDV has to be calculated by deducting notional depreciation from the original cost of that asset. That's it. Other points are there just to be noted also. Let us say if there is any cost of the asset met by the government in the form of a subsidy, grant or reimbursement, what should we do? What is the big deal in that? Original cost is there. Let us say you want to purchase an electric vehicle. Say one electric vehicle has to be purchased. Let us say government is giving some 10,000 rupees subsidy. Original cost of the vehicle is, let us say, 80,000. Government bears 10,000 rupees. Means effectively what is your cost? 70,000. That's all. Doesn't require any big provision. Simply whatever that subsidy, grant or reimbursement is, that shall be deducted from the cost. Actual real cost after the deduction of subsidy, grant or reimbursement only will be considered as actual cost. The name itself is actual cost. So that itself can be applied in such cases where any grant was received from government. And another situation is also there, as we discussed in general, though we are yet to discuss the detailed provisions of 35 or 35 AD, but by now we should know what is the speciality of 35 or 35 AD. Both the cases, capital expenditure can be also claimed as deduction 100%. That means there is no depreciation possible on that. How can you claim deduction twice on the same amount? When an asset is purchased, let us say for scientific research, 1 crore rupees worth of asset is purchased. How much deduction can be claimed in section 35? 1 crore is already claimed. So you want to claim some more depreciation on that also? No. How is it possible? So not possible. Same way, if an asset is acquired for a specified business, as specified in 35 AD, capital expenditure can be allowed as deduction. You already claimed full deduction. Depreciation though is only some percentage of the actual cost. But already when you claimed 100% deduction in section 35 or 35 AD, it doesn't make any sense to provide any depreciation. That is why the actual cost of all of them can be taken as zero. That is another logical point that also we should remember. Means no depreciation under section 32 if SSC has already claimed a deduction under section 35 or 35 AD. Same amount cannot be deducted twice under different sections. Not possible. That means actual cost of such assets shall be taken as zero. These are the variety situations related to actual cost of the asset computation. But very important point is also there, which will be useful in problem solving. If any asset is acquired by payment of cash more than 10,000 rupees to a person in a day, then such payments shall be ignored while computing the actual cost. As you all are aware, the government has been discouraging the cash transactions since a long time, and in continuation of that, any cash payment of more than 10,000 rupees to any person in a day for acquisition of the asset, if it is made, that shall be just ignored. Means what? It will not be forming part of actual cost. But still it is really paid. Doesn't matter. The Act says no, you cannot include it in the actual cost. Means you will lose the benefit of depreciation, because you are making a cash payment of more than 10,000 rupees to one person in a day. That one person in a day is also important. We are talking about per day 10,000 rupees. So what happens if a person is paid exactly 10,000 rupees for each of the 365 days? Then there is no problem. There is no problem. That is okay. But if it is paid more than 10,000 rupees in one day, then that will not be included in the cost of the asset. So, acquisition happens, if at all it happens, any asset has to be purchased if at all the SSEs want to purchase and claim depreciation. Simply speaking, what is the essence of this provision is, was you have to pay by check, account pay check, or bank draft, or bank transfer, NEFT, RTGS, whatever you do, whatever the online payment transfers you do, but not cash. What happens if cash is paid? That is as good as a null and void transaction for the purpose of 32. In reality, what is it? We don't care. 32 just says, ignore that transaction, we don't give you facility of depreciation on that. If that amount exceeds 10,000 rupees to one person per day, if the payments are made in cash more than 10,000 rupees, then such amounts should be ignored while computing the actual cost. Means they are not eligible for depreciation at all. Then a question might come, sir, if you pay 15,000 rupees to purchase, let us say some SSE says, okay, he has purchased a table worth 15,000 rupees and paid in cash. Same day, one person, he has paid in cash 15,000 rupees. Can he claim depreciation on that as furniture? He purchased a table. Answer is no. Can he claim depreciation on 5,000? No. Can he claim depreciation on 10,000? No. On how much amount he can claim depreciation? 0. Because this 10,000 is again not for calculation, it is only a condition. If the SSE pays 10,000 rupees, more than 10,000 rupees in any day to one person for the purchase of acquisition of asset, then such transaction itself is as good as not valid for purpose of 32. We just ignore the transaction. SSE may say, I don't know, 15,000 rupees I paid in cash. No problem. You paid in cash, you got the table, but you cannot get depreciation. No, that is not allowed. So, okay, practically what is the loophole here? Okay, if the same SSE purchases the table of 15,000 rupees from one of the furniture companies, furniture dealers, and if he pays 10,000 rupees one day, 5,000 rupees another day, no problem. No problem. Or if he pays 8,000 rupees one day, 7,000 rupees another day, no problem. He can consider entire 15,000 rupees as cost of acquisition. But in one day, he cannot pay more than 10,000 rupees to a person in cash. So basically, these all things are to discourage cash payments. From that also, I will take loopholes and use cash payments. There are people who do that. Let them do that. We don't need to worry about that. That will anyway happen. For every provision, there will be some loophole. Some people will be always there to search for that and use them for their own benefit. If they are interested in that, let them be. Let us not be interested in that. Let us be interested in the provision of what the Act is saying. If any payment is made for purchase or acquisition of any asset more than 10,000 rupees to one person in a day in cash, other than by way of account pay, check, draft, bank transfer, etc., then such transaction itself is as good as not happened in the eyes of Income Tax Act. Means such payments will be ignored while computing the actual cost. That is the point to be noted here. These are various points, very important things to be noted related to actual cost. Once we have actual cost, where that will be useful? That is useful here in step 2, where we have to add the actual cost of the assets to the opening WDV, what was there at the beginning of the year. How to calculate actual cost? Under normal circumstances, there is no big deal. Purchase price itself is actual cost. Under variety circumstances like gift, like inheritance, like a transfer between holding and subsidiary company, like amalgamation, like demerger, or somebody converted building into from personal property to a commercial property, or somebody from abroad came to India, while coming he brought some assets. All these are variety cases. In all variety cases, how to compute the actual cost is a very important aspect. And the cash payments of more than 10,000 rupees are not to be included in the actual cost also is a very, very important point to be noted and remembered. Now let us move on to the types of depreciation, which is normal and additional depreciation. See, normal depreciation, when we are talking about depreciation, normally whatever is we are talking so far is normal depreciation. So what is normal depreciation? How to calculate? The written down value of the block of the assets that was calculated here at the end of the year, that is the written down value at the end of the year, multiply with the applicable rate of depreciation. Of course, full rate if it is put to use for 180 days or more, half rate if it is put to use for less than 180 days. Then you get depreciation allowance normally. But one more point to be noted, very important point and exceptions to this rule. Depreciation is not allowable in the following cases. When? If the block of assets is having a WDV that is empty on the last day of the previous year. Means the block of assets is not there. It is empty. Means all assets are sold. All assets are sold and there is WDV, but that block of assets is not having any value and there is no ending value that is there. In other words, all assets are sold but there is still WDV of the block. How is that possible? So we need to take these things separately. Let us say there is a block of assets, whatever it is, the block of assets is there. There is an opening WDV of say 10 lakhs rupees and assets purchased during the period are 2 lakhs rupees and all assets are sold. All assets are sold for say 8 lakhs. So what is the closing WDV? Is there a WDV first of all? Yes. 10 plus 2 minus 8, that is 4. There is WDV. As far as just numerical computations is concerned, there is WDV. But is the block there? No. Block is empty. It has a WDV, but it is empty. So what happens? Can we say we will provide depreciation on this 4 lakhs? Absolutely rubbish, because there is no asset there. When there is no asset, how can you provide depreciation? Doesn't make sense. So what will arise there? In this case, there is no depreciation. No depreciation. Now the capital gains will start. Short-term capital loss will arise. What happens there? Reverse calculation will happen. First of all, how much is the sale proceeds? 8 lakhs. How much is the total of these two? 12 lakhs. That means 4 lakhs of loss is there. Means opening WDV plus purchases 12 lakhs. Worth of assets are sold for 8 lakhs only. Profit or loss? Loss. And what type of loss that is? Short-term capital loss. And one more point to be noted. In case of depreciable assets, the gain or loss, whatever it may be, in relation to the capital gain or loss, it will be always short-term. Always. Short-term only will be there. So when we say gain also, we will say short-term capital gain. When we say loss also, we say capital loss, that is short-term capital loss. That is the first scenario where the short-term capital loss will arise. Where a block of assets has a WDV, just like some positive amount is there, but actually that block is empty. Means there is no asset at all. All assets are sold already. Then what will arise? Definitely short-term capital loss will arise. Let us take another scenario. If some of the assets have been sold, the block is not empty, but it has no WDV. How is it possible? Read it carefully. Some of the assets are only sold, not all assets are sold. Only some of the assets have been sold. And the block is not empty. Means only some of the assets are sold, right? The block cannot be said empty. But it has no WDV. How is it possible? Quite possible. Let us take the same example. Let us say 10 lakhs rupees was the opening WDV of the block. Say assets purchased are 2 lakhs rupees. And this assets, the entire block, or if not entire block, some of the assets, not entire block, some of the assets are only sold. Let us say for 15 lakhs. Then what is the closing WDV? Minus 3 lakhs. Does it make sense? Once again, no. There cannot be negative WDV because here we can say there is no WDV. Negative means as good as not possible. Means this situation also does not warrant depreciation. In the first scenario also there was no depreciation. Though there was WDV, there was no depreciation. Why? Because block was empty. And in that scenario, short-term capital loss has arisen. In this scenario, there is no WDV at all. Negative means as good as no. That doesn't make sense to have a negative WDV. So, in this case, what will arise? Let us understand naturally. Reverse calculation. Sale proceeds are 15 lakhs. What is the cost? Originally, that is opening WDV plus purchases, 12 lakhs. Means what in this case? 3 lakhs of short-term capital gain has arisen. That will arise in this case. When this will happen? When the sale consideration is more than the value of the block. That is when this will happen. Though there is some assets remaining in the block, still the WDV has not remained, so no depreciation on that, but short-term capital gain will emerge out of that. That is one scenario. Of course, the same scenario can be applied to if all the assets have been sold and it has no WDV, then also there will be short-term capital gain. Logic is still the same. Only difference is, earlier we said only some of the assets are sold for 15 lakhs. Now let us say all assets are sold for 15 lakhs. Still anyway, there will not be any WDV. So still calculation will be same. How much is sale proceeds? 15 lakhs. By selling all assets. What was the cost of them? 10 plus 2, 12. What is the short-term capital gain? 3. So as far as these 2 points are concerned, B and C are more or less similar. Only difference between them is in point B, some assets are sold. In point C, all assets are sold. But one point common in them is there is no WDV at the end of the year. Why is that? Because the sale proceeds of the assets related to that block are more than the opening WDV plus purchases. That's all. On the other side, the earlier scenario, first case, where short-term capital loss will emerge, where all assets are sold, but still there is some WDV because the assets are sold for an amount lesser than opening WDV plus purchases. That means short-term capital loss will arise in that scenario. So first case short-term capital loss and other two cases short-term capital gain. Very, very important point. You can easily understand why also, because it is covering two heads at the same time. PGBP is also covered, capital gains is also covered. But once again, point to be noted, for depreciable assets, capital gain or loss will be always short term. That's a very important point to be remembered. Then, some other situations can also be given in the examination questions. What if there is some amalgamation, demerger or reorganization of the business? Sometimes it might happen. For example, there is a change in the ownership of the business. Anything can happen. Ownership of the assets can change, right? So that can happen due to succession, amalgamation, business reorganization or demerger. Whatever the reason may be, the assets have changed hands. In other words, for certain part of the year, one SSC has used them. For another part of the year, another SSC has used them. So question will arise definitely. How to calculate depreciation? Who can claim depreciation? Is it the transferor or a transferee? Of course, both can claim. But on what basis? On the ratio of number of days. So first thing first, what we have to do is, first we have to calculate depreciation as if nothing has happened. No amalgamation, no succession, no demerger, no conversion. Let us say private company converted into LLP, LLP converted into private company, sole proprietorship converted into company. Anything can happen. First we have to calculate depreciation as if nothing happened. Just normally we have to just compute depreciation as if nothing has happened. After calculating the depreciation, we have to apportion such depreciation between the predecessor and successor in the ratio of number of days. That is very, very important point also. Questions will be asked in that context as well. That is in case of business reorganization, amalgamation, demerger, for succession, any way, whatever the reason may be, asset has changed the hands in the year, then who will claim depreciation, how much? The predecessor also will be able to claim, successor also will be able to claim depending upon the ratio of number of days they have used it. That's it. And as we already discussed earlier, depreciation is mandatory, it is not optional. SSC cannot say, I don't want to claim depreciation. He has to claim. It is a benefit to the SSC, and you are not giving a choice to the SSC also. Yes, that is a variety. This is the only place where Income Tax Act is giving a benefit to the SSC is by force. All other cases, it will impose on the SSCs some burden, not benefit. But this section gives benefit to the SSC by force. If somebody SSC says, I don't want to claim depreciation, Income Tax Act says, Baba, it is not optional. You have to claim it. You have to. Irrespective of the fact whether the SSC claims it or not, depreciation is mandatory. Without this, the return will not be accepted. If there is depreciation, if there are assets naturally, then only. That is a very important point also. But anyway, not helpful for us, only for reality. That could be relevant. Now coming to the another very crucial provision related to depreciation is additional depreciation. You don't need to remember all those subsections, subclauses and all. Just as an extension of section 32 only, additional depreciation can be claimed by certain types of SSCs. Which type of SSCs? Condition number 1. First of all, the SSC who wants to claim additional depreciation must be engaged in manufacture or production of any article or thing, or in the business of generation, transmission or distribution of power. So power companies, electricity companies, here any company, generation, transmission, distribution of power companies can claim additional depreciation. And for that matter, any other SSC who is in the manufacturing or production business of any article or thing, they can claim this. Means service sector and all, they cannot claim additional depreciation. Only manufacturing organizations will be able to claim additional depreciation. Power, electricity companies also can claim additional depreciation. That is first condition number 1. We can call it eligibility. Second, what should be done by the SSC? SSC should have installed new plant and machinery. New is important, not second hand. New means not second hand plant and machinery, new plant and machinery, that to where? In factory during the previous year. Factory in the sense, don't take it too literally, workplace, wherever the operations will actually happen. That is a place where the SSC should have installed a new plant and machinery. Production place, workplace we can call it. Plant you can call it. So that is the condition number 2. Very important condition because every word is important. New is important. Plant and machinery is also important. That means furniture and all are not eligible for additional depreciation. Only plant or machinery is eligible. Buildings are not eligible. Only plant or machinery is eligible. That is very clear from the condition itself. And imagine plant and machinery is installed at somewhere in office. That is also not eligible. It has to be installed at the factory where the production actually happens, actual operations happen. There new machinery has to be installed. Purchased and installed naturally. And naturally it should be an eligible plant and machinery. The question comes, sir, what is eligible plant and machinery? Simple, anything which is acquired after 31st March 2005. You don't need to remember that date. It is not required much. That will be eligible for additional depreciation. So that is called eligible plant and machinery. Point is not that. Point is very important is which are not eligible for additional depreciation. What assets are not eligible for additional depreciation is very important. Other than them, remaining assets are eligible naturally. So, simply speaking, the additional depreciation is that which can be claimed by the manufacturing or production SSCs or those who are in the business of electricity. And if they installed and purchased a new plant and machinery and installed them at the factory, they can claim additional depreciation. But what assets are those on which they cannot claim additional depreciation? These are the assets, you have to remember them. Ship and aircraft, no, they cannot claim additional depreciation, though that will fall under the definition of plant and machinery. Still no vehicle at all. Then, for that matter, actually any vehicles also, office appliances and vehicles, any vehicle, not only ship or aircraft, Let us say SC purchased a car. Can he claim additional depreciation on that? No. No, he cannot. Other office appliances, vehicles, no, they are not eligible. Building not eligible, furniture not eligible, only plant and machinery is eligible. Even if that plant and machinery is old plant and machinery, then also it is not eligible. In other words, second hand plant and machinery is not eligible, only new plant and machinery is eligible. What if the plant and machinery is installed in office premises or any residential accommodation or guest house? No, that is not eligible because already the condition number 2 says it should have been installed at the factory, not in office. Let us say a computer is purchased and installed in office. No, it is not eligible for additional depreciation. A printer is purchased and kept in office. No, it is not eligible for additional depreciation. Air conditioner is purchased and kept at the guest house of the CEO. No, it is not eligible for additional depreciation. Like this, these are the assets which are not eligible for additional depreciation. Also, if there is any plant and machinery already which is eligible for 100% deduction, like what? Once again, section 35 or 35 AD gives SSC is an option and SSC is a choice and definitely facility to get 100% deduction on capital expenditure. Already when you got 100% deduction, there is no question of depreciation also, there is no question of additional depreciation also. Intangible assets cannot be claiming additional depreciation also. These are the assets which are not eligible for additional depreciation. Very important list, you have to remember that. So conditions related to claiming of additional depreciation are very, very important. And of course, additional depreciation is not available if the plant and machinery installed is sold in the same year. That means it is purchased also, sold also. No, then additional depreciation will not be available on that. And additional depreciation shall not be allowed shall be allowed even if the block has a nil or a negative value. That is also another important point. Shall be allowed. Because additional depreciation is given as an incentive for promoting companies, organizations to buy new plant and machinery, to install new plant and machinery, so that naturally when there is new plant, new machinery and etc. like that, that will generate more employment, more manufacturing will happen. To encourage the manufacturing sector, additional depreciation is given. So the point is, even though the WDV at the end of the year has a nil value or negative value, there may not be any original depreciation, but that will not stop additional depreciation. The amount of new plant and machinery which was purchased during the year shall still be allowed for additional depreciation. That is a variety point also to be remembered. And if the asset is purchased and sold in the same year, then definitely no additional depreciation will be available on such assets. Very, very important provision. After the normal depreciation, everything related to additional depreciation also shall be remembered very thoroughly. Thoroughness is what is required. What assets are eligible, what conditions should be satisfied, what assets are not eligible also has to be very clearly remembered. Then naturally another situation comes, what if the asset is put to use for less than 180 days? Then situation will be different. And additional depreciation can be allowed only in the first year. It is not year after year. Only first year, in the year of acquisition, installation of plant and machinery, not afterwards. It is a one-time deduction. Normal depreciation every year can be claimed. Additional depreciation can be claimed only once, when a new plant and machinery is installed during the previous year. Afterwards, there will not be any additional depreciation. However, there is another point here. If the asset is put to use for less than 180 days in the first year, then what? Then only half of the additional depreciation will be allowed in that year. Remaining half can be claimed in the succeeding year. That is also a very important point. In problems it will come. Means what? If the asset is put to use for, new asset which has been purchased is put to use for less than 180 days, we are talking additional depreciation. Huh? Normal depreciation is separate. Don't mix that. Additional depreciation can be claimed also half of the additional only. Normally, how much is the additional depreciation? If you look at this, 20% is the rate of additional depreciation which is normally applicable. If the asset is put to use for less than 180 days, what is the rate of additional depreciation? 10%, means half of that. Then what happens to the remaining 10%? No problem. That can be claimed in the succeeding year. So only in that case, additional depreciation is claimed in 2 years. That too, half. But entire amount of additional depreciation is still the same. That is 20% of the cost of acquisition of new plant and machinery which has been installed at the factory. That is about computation of additional depreciation with rates of 20% if the asset is put to use for 180 days or more, and 10% if the assets are put to use for less than 180 days. Now there is one more special scenario here. If the asset that has been acquired and put to use is in relation to an undertaking of any enterprise which is manufacturing or producing any article or thing on or after April 2015. But where is that? In any backward area notified by the central government in the states of Andhra Pradesh or Bihar or Telangana or West Bengal. In these four states, not everywhere, in the backward areas as notified by the central government. What are the backward areas, sir? There is a big list of that. Why do you want that? We don't want that. That is not required for us. All that we need to know is the provision, that's all. Which backward areas are there in Bihar? How do we know them? Why do we know? We don't need that. In reality, yes, that is important. But not for us. But for us, what is important is if the new assets which have been purchased in respect of plant and machinery is that which is purchased on or after 1/4/2015, and that to where that machinery is installed in the four states, backward areas of four states. What four states? Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Bihar and West Bengal. Then the additional depreciation rates will be different. Instead of 20%, additional depreciation will be 35% or 17.5%. Why? If the asset is put to use for less than 180 days in the first year of acquisition, then 17.5% in that year, remaining 17.5% in the next year can be claimed as additional depreciation. By the way, this is instead of 20%, not in addition to 20%. Be very clear. Instead of 20%. So instead of 20%, if the SSC has started any business or installed any new plant and machinery in the four states backward areas, additional depreciation that you can claim will be 35%. But can we assume that SC was in Telangana backward areas and all? No, we cannot assume that. It has to be given in the question. If nothing is given, additional depreciation is normally 20% or 10% as the case may be. Normal depreciation, how much will that be? Of course, that is different. That depends upon the type of the asset according to this table that you should have already remembered very well. These are the various provisions related to computation of depreciation by taking computation of written down value first. For that, we need actual cost. Then once you calculate normal depreciation, if eligible, SC can claim additional depreciation also. Normal depreciation is mandatory. Everybody can claim. Actually, everybody should claim. Additional depreciation, everybody cannot claim. That can be claimed only if the conditions are satisfied as prescribed in the Act. These are the various provisions. Let us solve some of the questions quickly related to depreciation, and some more questions we can solve in the next session also. Look at this first question as an example. Mr. X is a proprietor engaged in manufacturing business. So we have to read the question carefully. Manufacturing itself means what? We have to keep in mind he is eligible for additional depreciation also. That is first thing. Now, opening WDV of the plant and machinery at the beginning of the year is 30 lakhs. New plant and machinery purchased and put to use on 8th June 2019 is 20 lakhs. Immediately our brain should think, is that put to use for more than 180 days or less than 180 days? During the previous year, naturally. When it was put to use on June, definitely it is put to use for more than 180 days. What about the asset new plant and machinery? New plant and machinery. New plant and machinery. But this is acquired, that 20 lakhs was acquired on 8th of June. Date may not be relevant for us, but relevant is whether it is put to use for 180 days or not. Yes. So full depreciation is allowed on that 20 lakhs. What about this? This 8 lakhs is acquired, asset of worth 8 lakhs is acquired on 15th December. Is it put to use for more than 180 days? No, definitely not. December means hardly 15, 16 more days, and after that 3 months. So definitely less than 180 days. So this is more than 180 days category. This is less than 180 days category. That has to be first identified from the question. Then it says computer installed in the office premises on 2/1/2020. Once again, this is also less than 180 days category. So these are the three types of assets which were acquired during the previous year. Compute the amount of depreciation and additional depreciation as per the Income Tax Act 1961 for the assessment year 2021. Assume that all assets were purchased by way of account pay check. If it is not given also, we have to assume that only. But it is very clearly given, which means there is no disallowance. 10,000 rupees, more than that paid in cash should be ignored. All those things are not applicable. SC is following the law very well and is paying all the assets by account pay check. So let us understand one by one. We can do it in different ways in presentation. I am only telling the calculation. How can this be calculated, the depreciation originally? First of all, depreciation has to be calculated on the closing WDV. So if the question also asks what is the WDV at the end of the year, then we have to have the same format that we had earlier. That is like what? Opening WDV, add additions during the year, purchases, deduct sale proceeds, then there is closing WDV. On that we have to calculate depreciation, deduct that also, then we will get WDV, which is depreciated amount at the end of the year. But that is not asked in this question. So let us consider this as only a computational question. Opening WDV is there, 30 lakhs. On that, how much rate of depreciation can be applied? We are talking plant and machinery, right? Plant and machinery means normally 15%. So calculate that and keep it aside. I am talking about normal depreciation. So normal depreciation how much? 30 lakhs into 15%, that is 4 lakh 50,000. Keep it aside. $4,50,000. Then new plant and machinery purchased. Once again, we have to be very clear. When we are calculating normal depreciation, we should not think about additional depreciation and vice versa. Our brain has to be very clear and only focused on what we are calculating. We will come to the additional depreciation later. First, let us focus on normal depreciation. Plant and machinery purchased and put to use for more than 180 days. Is it eligible for full depreciation for the year? Of course, yes. How much is that? Again, 15%. So 20 lakhs into 15% means how much? 3 lakhs. So that is also another eligibility of depreciation under section 32, 3 lakhs. Okay. Then what about this other plant and machinery put to use for less than 180 days? That will be eligible for only half of that. That means instead of 15%, it will be eligible for only 7.5%. So 8 lakhs into 7.5%. That comes to 60,000. Then computer normally eligible for 40%, because it is put to use for less than 180 days. It will be eligible for only 20%. So 3 lakhs into 20%. Half of 40% is 20%. So 20% is there. That is also normal depreciation, comes to another 60,000. So finally speaking, what is the total of normal depreciation that can be claimed? 750,000 plus 60,000 plus 60,000. Total is 8 lakhs 70,000. Let us say 8.7 lakhs. 8.7 lakhs is the total normal depreciation. First you have to do that. Additional depreciation, when we come to that, we will come to that. So 8.7 lakhs is normal depreciation, fine. Now comes additional depreciation. Additional depreciation, how much can be claimed? On what it can be claimed? Can it be claimed on opening WDV? No. It is only claimable on new assets which are purchased. That too only plant and machinery. So can it be claimed on computer installed in office premises? No. This is also not eligible for additional depreciation, though it is eligible for normal depreciation. So what are the only two things which are eligible for additional depreciation? One is this 20 lakhs. The other one is this 8 lakhs. But rate of additional depreciation for this 20 lakh asset will be 20% because it is put to use for more than 180 days. Rate of depreciation, additional depreciation on this new plant and machinery which is put to use for less than 180 days will be only 10%. So do the calculation simply. 20 lakhs into 20% plus 8 lakhs into 10%. That is the additional depreciation. That comes to 4.8 lakhs. 4 lakhs 80,000. That is 4.8 lakhs. So what is the total depreciation that can be claimed by the SSE during the previous year? 13.5 lakhs. That is the final answer for this question. What was the question? Amount of depreciation and additional depreciation that can be claimed by the SSE. Answer is 13.5 lakhs. That's it. That is the answer for one of the examples given in the ICI material. Then another question also is there, like let us say Gopi, carrying on a business as a proprietor, converted the same business into a limited company by names of Gopi Pipes Private Limited, whatever it is. From which date? From 1/7/2019. The details of the assets are given below. What are the details of the asset? Block 1 is there, which is having a written down value of 15% rate of plant and machinery naturally. That is opening WDV on 1/4/2019, amount is 12 lakhs. Block 2 has an opening WDV of 25 lakhs, which is buildings with a rate of depreciation of 10%. The company Gopi Pipes Private Limited acquired plant and machinery in December 2019 for 10 lakhs rupees. It has been doing the business from 1/7/2019. That is when the new organization has been formed. So there is a predecessor Gopi, successor Gopi Pipes Private Limited. Compute the quantum of depreciation to be claimed by the predecessor Mr. Gopi and the successor Gopi Pipes Private Limited for the assessment year 2021. Assume that plant and machinery were purchased by way of account pay check, and also it is given that ignore additional depreciation. Ignore means ignore, that's all. We don't know what is that Gopi Pipes Private Limited, what do they do and all. Not necessary to assume anything. If it is given clearly in the question, then yes, otherwise no. In the earlier question, it was clearly given. Mr. X is engaged in manufacturing business. So there is additional depreciation eligibility. Here, clearly given, ignore additional depreciation. So ignore, simple. So what is this case here we are talking? Reconstruction, reorganization, amalgamation, demerger, whatever the name it is. The asset has been used by two SSEs in the same previous year. How to calculate depreciation? By apportioning the amount of depreciation on the basis of number of days of usage. But once again, point has to be noted here, this 10 lakhs rupees which was purchased by the company, will Gopi also be able to claim depreciation on that? No. How can it be? Because only the successor directly purchased it. So the question of apportionment does not arise for that 10 lakhs. Only on what question of apportionment arises? About these two things question of apportionment arises. We have to calculate depreciation as if nothing has happened. First calculate depreciation. On 12 lakhs, 15% means how much? 1,80,000. On 25 lakhs, 10% rate of depreciation on the opening WDV, that is 2,50,000. Total is 4,30,000. Okay. This has to be split between two people, Gopi and Gopi Pipes Private Limited. On what basis is the question? Law clearly said on the basis of number of days of usage. So we have to split the number of days of usage. Up to 30th June, Gopi used it. From 1st July onwards, Gopi Pipes Private Limited used the assets. So up to 30th June means how many days? Calculate that. 30 days in April, May 31, June 30 means 91 days. The assets were used by Gopi. And once again, be clear, how many days the assets were used by the Gopi Pipes Private Limited? 275 days. Why? Because 2020 is a leap year. Because of that, you have to be careful there also. So distribute this 4,30,000 in that ratio. That's all. How much will that be for Gopi and how much will that be for Gopi Pipes Private Limited? For Gopi, how much will that be? 4,30,000 into 91 divided by 366. That comes to around 1,06,913 approximately. 1,06,913. You don't need to do that separately. 1,06,913, if you reduce it from 4,30,000, automatically how much depreciation can be claimed by the Gopi Pipes Private Limited? That will be 3,23,087. That is the distribution. But is this the total depreciation that can be claimed by Gopi Pipes Private Limited? No, because it has purchased 10 lakhs rupees worth of machinery in December. That will be eligible for 7.5% depreciation, which means 75,000. Why 7.5%? Because it was put to use for less than 180 days. So how much will be the total depreciation that can be claimed by Gopi Pipes Private Limited? 323,087 plus 75,000 means 3,98,087. That is Gopi Pipes Private Limited depreciation, because it has purchased something else during the year also, which is also eligible for depreciation. But since it is purchased in December and put to use for less than 180 days, only 7.5% on 10 lakhs will be eligible. Anyway, I said ignore additional depreciation, don't worry about that. So the total depreciation that can be claimed by Gopi Pipes Private Limited is 398,087, and that can be claimed by Gopi is 106,913. That is the final answer for this question. These type of questions can very well be asked in the examination, even as a 2 marks MCQ also, one of them, or 4 marks, 5 marks, small questions. Earlier it was asked for 4 marks. Many times similar questions were asked. Predecessor, successor type of questions are quite popular in CA exams. First question was a standard question for understanding the value of or valuation or computation of depreciation. That is also a possible examination question. As I said earlier, depreciation is the topic where questions can come exclusively on this. There may be a question on PGBP, entire chapter also anyway. On top of that, there can be questions exclusively on depreciation also. That is why this provision of section 32 is very, very important. With that, we can conclude today's session, and in the next session, we will continue this problem solving related to section 32. Some more questions and problems we will solve for understanding of application of this section 32, and then we will move on to other sections also after section 32, which is related to section 35. We will discuss those things in the next class. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Thank you very much.